Hi, my name is Alan Johnson, and we are going to be offering a four-part series talking about balance in one's life. We're going to look at intellectual, social, emotional, spiritual, and also physical. My theory is that in order for a human being to be most balanced and feeling most successful are those times when their lives are balanced in all arenas of their lives. We're going to begin with the intellectual today. When you think about one's intellectual life, we understand that we primarily learn in two different ways, through experience and also through observation. In observation, I'm not only talking about seeing and watching people in real life, but I'm also talking about the kind of observation that occurs in reading. But first, let's talk about experience. To my mind, it makes sense to do as much as possible, to have all kinds of experiences. I am 72 years old, and in my lifetime, I've had a great deal of experiences. And each one of those experiences has helped for me to understand the interconnection of all things. I began after college with an interest in piloting, which I did for about 3 years. And after that, it was scuba diving and mountain climbing and public speaking.
Wow, I feel good.
All of those experiences enable a person to understand how all things are connected, how they are interwoven. If you spend 3 years of your life on a particular passion, at the end of those 3 years, you're pretty much an expert. Maybe not a worldwide expert, but probably in your region, people will be coming to you to ask for help on how to do something, including photography, which has also been a passion of mine. So keep on having those experiences. Now, the second thing that I'd like to talk about is observation. Yes, it's important to watch other people and to glean what works for you and what doesn't work, dismiss what doesn't work, and retain that which does work. But the most observation can be done through books. With books, we are able to get into the minds and hearts of some of the greatest thinkers who have ever lived on earth. Now, a lot of people don't read, not nearly as much as I think they should. In fact, Americans in general read less than one nonfiction book a year. And even 58% of college graduates never read another nonfiction book for the rest of their lives. That seems astonishing to me. So I'd like to recommend a few of my favorite books, and because I believe they could be very helpful in your lives. The first group of books are nonfiction. My first choice is a book entitled Choice Theory by William Glasser. It's a book that helps us understand how we satisfy our needs and how sometimes we do it in a way that's irresponsible. And then he teaches us a more responsible way of satisfying our human needs. An excellent book. The second book I'd like to recommend is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I had the honor of working for Stephen Covey, who was the author of that book, working in his organization and teaching those 7 habits. And I can tell you that abiding by those 7 habits can indeed be life-changing. The third book is The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. It's really a book about spirituality, how to become more loving, more caring, and how to garner those relationships that are truly rich. The fourth book is, again, by Scott Peck. It's called A Different Drum. And in that book, Scott Peck talks about relationships and the building of community. And I will be talking more about that later on in this series. The next book that's a favorite of mine is a more recent book. It's called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. And it was written by Yuval Harari, who is a professor at history at the Jerusalem Hebrew University. The book is incredibly written, extremely easy to read, and yet gives you a full understanding how humankind has developed, along with some ideas on how we can continue to grow intellectually and morally. The final book that I'm going to recommend is a book that was written by Howard Zinn, Z-I-N-N. The book title is A People's History of the United States. Now, this book looks at, obviously, the history of the United States, but through the eyes of people that have been disenfranchised throughout our history. The poor, the minorities, women, and we get a good look at what the history is like for most people in America, the people who are not the privileged class. Excellent reading. A few fiction books that are favorites of mine, and perhaps they are favorites of yours. First one on my list is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. When I am talking to friends from another country, especially in France, we've lived a number of years in France, I always recommend to my French friends To Kill a Mockingbird if they want to understand a little bit about what it's like to live in America. I think that book should go in a time capsule. Second book is rather new, rather recent. It's called Peace Like a River, and the author is Leif Enger. A wonderful book, and it has a little magic, and I think you will enjoy that reading. I know it certainly captivated me. Another book that is a favorite of mine is Slaughterhouse-Five. That's an American classic now, and the author, of course, is Kurt Vonnegut. And then finally, I'd recommend anything by some of America's finest writers, anything by Ernest Hemingway, John Steinbeck, and of course, Mark Twain. We should never forget him. So those are a few ideas on how you might consider improving your intellectual acumen, to learn a little bit more about the world that is around you and recognize how all things are interconnected.